The thing about werewolves is that no one ever talks about how messy dominance battles get. Seriously. Fur everywhere. It's like a pillow fight, except the pillows have claws and an attitude problem. The Blackridge Pack gathered beneath the full moon, watching two massive wolves circle each other like heavyweight boxers about to make questionable life choices. The stakes? Leadership of the entire pack. The loser? Well, let's just say no one ever saw them in wolf form again. Elder Ryland stood at the edge of the circle, his beard so long and wild, it looked like it had survived a few alpha battles itself. He leaned on his staff, which he clearly didn't need, but brought to all major events for dramatic effect. The old man squinted at the fighters, muttering to no one in particular. "Another one's gonna fall tonight," he said, shaking his head. "The moon's got a taste for blood." Someone coughed awkwardly. "Thank you for that, Elder Rylan," said one of the younger wolves, really setting the mood. "I speak the truth," Rylan continued, not the least bit bothered. "A new alpha rises, ruthless, cold, bound to the moon's call." He paused for effect, and he won't take no for an answer. This point, most of the pack was paying more attention to Ryland's doom and gloom predictions than the fight itself. One wolf was in the middle of asking if there'd be snacks, when, with a snarl, one of the combatants lunged. The larger wolf snapped his jaws shut on his opponent's neck, and it was over in seconds. Silence fell over the clearing, except for the occasional sound of fur rustling awkwardly as wolves shuffled their feet. Elder Ryland's eyes narrowed. "I told you," he whispered. At the far end of the clearing, a shadow leaned casually against a tree, watching the aftermath with an air of boredom, like he'd seen this all before, and wasn't impressed. His face was half hidden by the hood of his cloak, but the sharp gleam of his eyes was unmistakable, using exercise as a metaphor for life. Darius, one wolf braver than the rest, or perhaps dumber, glanced toward him and whispered, "Think he'll challenge for alpha next?" After a mere second, "I'd pay to see that," another wolf muttered. "You wouldn't see it," the first wolf replied. "It'd be over too fast." As the pack dispersed, leaving the blood-soaked ground behind, Darius stepped forward. He knelt by the fallen alpha and pressed 2 fingers to the cooling body. With a sigh that was equal parts resignation and irritation, he wiped the blood on his cloak. "Soon," he murmured to himself, eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. "I'll take what's mine." The wind shifted, rustling through the trees like it was trying to escape. Somewhere in the distance, Elder Ryland's voice floated through the air. "I heard that." Chapter 1. Alina wasn't sure how her day had gone from peaceful herb gathering to babysitting an overdramatic werewolf pup. But here she was, sitting on her porch with an 8-year-old whining like he'd lost a limb. "It's just a scratch, Evan," she said, dabbing a bit of healing salve on his arm. "I've seen squirrels tougher than you." Evan sniffled, looking down at the small scrape across his elbow like it was about to fall off. "You didn't see how big she was. Celine's wolf punted me across the training field. I flew, Alina, flew." Alina arched a brow, glancing at the tiny pup sitting in front of her. "You're what, 40 pounds? A strong breeze could punt you." Evan gasped like she'd personally insulted his entire bloodline. "I'm 52? Well, that explains why you landed so gracefully," she replied, trying not to laugh as she tied a bandage around his arm. "There. Good as new. Now stop wriggling." Evan slumped dramatically, his head resting against her knee. "I'm never going back to training. It's a death trap." "You're a werewolf. Training is kind of part of the deal," Alina said, patting his head. "And besides, if you quit now, Celine will just hunt you down and drag you back." His eyes widened. "She would?" "She absolutely would." Evan shot up, clutching his arm like he was preparing for battle. "Fine. I'll go back. But if I die, tell my mom I fought bravely. Oh, I'll be sure to mention the part where you cried over a scratch, she called after him as he bolted toward the village. Alina sighed, leaning back against the wooden post of her porch. Life as the Blackridge Pack's healer wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was peaceful. Most days, her biggest challenge was convincing pups like Evan that a scraped knee wasn't the end of the world. It was a nice balance to the rest of the pack, where fights for dominance were treated like a competitive sport and bruises were worn like trophies. Frankly, Alina preferred the scratches. Her cottage sat on the edge of the village, surrounded by fields of wild flowers and herbs she used for medicine. A small garden stretched along the front yard, with neat rows of lavender and mint. It was quiet, calm, and far enough away from the main den that she didn't have to listen to warriors yelling about whose fangs were bigger. Alina liked it that way. She wasn't exactly what you'd call alpha material. Where the rest of the pack howled at the moon and lived for the thrill of the fight, Alina stayed home, read books, and drank tea. She shifted into her wolf form maybe twice a month, usually just to chase away rabbits eating her lettuce. It wasn't that she couldn't fight, she just, chose not to. Most of the time. Alina. She glanced up, spotting Garrett, one of the elder wolves, stomping toward her with a look that said, "I don't have time for pleasantries." Garrett was the pack's messenger, which meant he was usually the bearer of bad news. His permanent scowl probably didn't help. "Is this about Evan?" Alina asked, raising a hand. "I already fixed him up. He's fine. Might be traumatized, but physically he's good." Garrett waved her off. "Not about the pup. This is bigger. We've got another dominance challenge coming up." Alina groaned and immediately regretted getting out of bed that morning. Oh, great. More fur flying around. You know how it is. Can't avoid these things. "I literally avoid them by staying right here," she replied, motioning to her porch. Garrett grunted. "Well, you might want to stock up on supplies. Last time half the pack needed stitches." Alina sighed, already mentally listing the herbs she'd need. Who's challenging who? Garrett's mouth tightened. "No one knows yet. All we've heard is that it's happening under the next full moon. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was barely enough time to teach Evan the difference between bravery and dramatic flair." Alina rubbed her temples. "I hate full moons." "Don't we all?" Garrett gave her a nod and started to walk away before pausing. "Oh, and if Darius shows up asking for you, good luck." She froze. "Why would Darius be looking for me?" Garrett shrugged, in that unhelpful way messengers always did when they didn't want to explain things. "No idea, just passing the message." Alina narrowed her eyes at his retreating back. Darius? The strongest, scariest alpha-in-waiting had zero reason to come near her. She hadn't spoken more than 3 words to him since she accidentally spilled tea on his boots last year. He hadn't killed her for it, so that was nice. But Darius wasn't exactly known for his friendly nature. If he was involved in this dominance challenge, her peaceful little world was about to get a lot more complicated. Alina stared out at the tree line, where shadows stretched long in the late afternoon light. 2 weeks, she muttered. Better start prepping the bandages. Chapter 2. Alina had always thought gathering herbs at night would be peaceful. The moonlit fields, the soft rustling of leaves, very cottagecore. But apparently the universe had other plans. She knelt by a patch of wild lavender, carefully snipping the stems and stuffing them into her satchel. The cool night air whispered through the trees, but something felt off. Off, not monsters lurking in the dark, off, but more like someone's watching, and it's not a friendly bunny. Alina glanced over her shoulder. Nothing. Just trees swaying lazily. Relax, she told herself, though she said it in the least relaxed voice imaginable. As a healer, Alina wasn't supposed to be afraid of the dark, but her wolf's senses were tingling in the, hey, maybe we should leave this area immediately kind of way. She stuffed the last handful of lavender into her bag and stood up, dusting dirt off her knees. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the village below. It should have been peaceful. It was peaceful. Until Alina froze mid-step. Nope. 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 That was not the I'm just casually howling at the moon because I'm dramatic kind of howl. That was the I'm a big bad wolf and probably up to no good kind. Great, she muttered, gripping her satchel like it was going to protect her from whatever was lurking out there. The howling faded, replaced by distant murmuring from the village. Alina could see faint lantern lights flickering along the edge of the houses, shadows of wolves moving in and out of doorways. They had definitely heard it too. Her instincts screamed at her to head home, lock the door and pretend she hadn't just heard that. But no, she had to pass through the village first, which meant listening to the gossip committee, aka the elder wolves who had nothing better to do than speculate wildly about everyone else's lives. As she trudged back into the village, she spotted a group of them clustered near the well, speaking in hushed tones. "Darius is involved," one of them whispered, because apparently the concept of whispering quietly didn't exist. "You know what that means?" "It means trouble." The second elder crossed his arms, looking far too pleased to share bad news. "He doesn't fight unless he's planning to win." Alina kept walking, hoping she could sneak by unnoticed. She should have known better. "Alina!" Elder Ryland's voice cut through the air like a clap of thunder. "You heard that howl, didn't you?" Her shoulders sank. "So close." "Oh, yeah, just passing through," she replied, holding up her satchel as if it were a hall pass. "Lavender mission complete." Ryland hobbled toward her, his long beard swaying in the breeze like a fuzzy curtain. That wasn't just any wolf. That was Darius. Alina blinked. "Darius howled? That was him?" "Sure was," Ryland said, stroking his beard as if he'd personally trained Darius in the art of dramatic howling. "When an alpha howls like that, it's a warning. Mark my words. He's getting ready for the dominance challenge." Alina tried to ignore the chill crawling down her spine. "Maybe he was just singing?" Ryland snorted. "Darius doesn't sing, girl. He growls in key at best." "Fair point." She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, whatever he's up to, it's got nothing to do with me." The elders exchanged looks. That was the kind of look that said, "Oh, sweet summer child, you have no idea." Before they could fill her head with more horrifying possibilities, Alina quickened her pace. "Anyway, great chat. I need to get back before my herbs wilt." "You'd best stay away from the challenge, Alina," Ryland called after her. "Moon's got plans for that one." She gave him an awkward thumbs up over her shoulder. Yep, staying far away. But as she walked home, Ryland's words echoed in her mind. Darius didn't fight unless he was planning to win. She wasn't sure what was scarier, the thought of Darius winning or the thought of what might happen if he lost. Chapter 3. Alina had one rule in life: don't attract attention. It was a simple rule, a good rule, one that had kept her happily out of the way during countless pack brawls and dominant squabbles. Yet somehow, fate, or maybe the moon goddess, loved testing her patience. Which was why she now found herself in the middle of the village square, face to face with Darius. To be clear, she hadn't meant to run into him. She'd been on her way to the bakery, thinking about pastries and minding her own business. But the second she stepped outside, there he was, towering over everyone like some dark, brooding shadow with arms. He was standing by the well, his expression hard as stone as he addressed a group of warriors. Darius wasn't the loud type, no yelling or chest thumping. The largest nope, he just stood there, arms crossed, speaking low enough that everyone had to lean in to catch a word. Classic power move. Alina ducked behind a fruit stand and prayed to blend in with the apples. Unfortunately, blending wasn't her strong suit. Darius's gaze flicked toward her. For one horrifying second, their eyes met. Alina's stomach immediately dropped into her shoes. He didn't glare exactly, but it was the kind of look that said, "I see you, and you are not stealthy." To make things worse, Elder Ryland's voice boomed across the square. "Ah, Alina, fancy seeing you out and about." Alina froze, mid-duck. Slowly she straightened, gripping the strap of her satchel like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. The warriors standing around Darius all turned to look at her. She offered a weak wave. "Hi, don't mind me, just herb stuff." Darius's eyes narrowed slightly, and she couldn't help but notice how he always looked like he was sizing people up, for battle, dinner, or both. He gave her the tiniest nod. Alina. Oh great, he knew her name. That was somehow worse. She swallowed hard and took a step toward the bakery, desperate to escape, but Ryland wasn't done. "You should come over, Alina. Listen to what Darius has to say. Big changes are coming." No thanks, she thought. I like my head attached to my body, but she couldn't exactly say that out loud, so instead she smiled, probably way too much, and said, "I'm sure whatever Darius is planning will be, great." Darius's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he turned back to his warriors. "Let's hope so," he said, loud enough for the whole square to hear, "because not everyone will survive what's coming." Wait, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. The villagers fell into uncomfortable silence, shifting nervously, like they suddenly remembered they had places to be. Aline felt every hair on the back of her neck stand on end. Cool, super comforting, definitely the kind of thing she wanted to hear while she was just trying to buy pastries. Darius's eyes flicked back to her briefly, as if to say, "You probably should have stayed home." She didn't need to be told twice. "All right, well," she said, backing away toward the bakery. "I'll just go now. Good luck with all the surviving." No one laughed, not even a pity chuckle. Darius's lips twitched slightly, maybe in amusement, maybe in a, "wow, this one's weird" kind of way. She turned and speed-walked straight into the bakery, slamming the door behind her. The baker, a sweet older woman named Mira, raised an eyebrow from behind the counter. "You look like you just saw a ghost." "Nope, worse," Alina said, gasping for air. "I made eye contact with Darius." Mira's face scrunched in sympathy. "Oh, honey, you want a cookie?" "Yes, and maybe a new identity." As Mira handed over a warm pastry, Alina stared out the window, watching Darius and his warriors march toward the forest. Changes were coming, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she had a feeling she wouldn't be able to avoid them for much longer. Chapter 4. Alina wasn't a coward. Okay, maybe a little bit. But when the entire village was buzzing about the upcoming dominance challenge and the possibility of very large wolves fighting to the death, she thought it was perfectly reasonable to start considering other living arrangements, like a cozy cabin on the other side of the mountain, or maybe somewhere tropical. Could werewolves live near the beach? Did anyone need a healer in the Bahamas? She sat on the porch of her cottage, absently grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. The steady rhythm usually calmed her. Not today. The village was too loud. Everyone was talking about Darius. "How many wolves do you think he'll fight?" someone shouted from the market. "At least 3, maybe 4. "Think he'll kill them all?" "Dunno. Probably. That's what alphas do." Alina's grip on the pestle tightened. Super encouraging. Can't wait for that. The dominance challenge was 2 days away, and Darius was the name on everyone's lips. Half the pack whispered his victory was inevitable. The other half muttered about how he'd tear apart anyone who stood in his way. Frankly, Alina wasn't interested in sticking around to see either outcome. "I could leave," she mumbled to herself, stirring the herbs like they'd give her life advice. Head to one of the smaller villages for a while, just until things settle down. Her wolf, the part of her that barely stirred unless snacks were involved, growled at the thought. Coward, it seemed to say. Don't start, Alina grumbled. You're the one who naps through pack meetings. The wolf stayed quiet, but she felt it pacing at the edges of her mind, as if even it thought abandoning the pack was the wrong move. Great. When your inner wolf starts judging you, life is officially too complicated. Alina shook off the feeling and focused on her herbs. Healing was her thing. It was calm, quiet, bloodless. She liked it that way. Fights for dominance? Not her problem. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't an alpha. She was the person patching up the wolves who got knocked out by the actual fighters. So why did she feel guilty about wanting to leave? Alina sighed, scraping the powdered herbs into a glass jar. I'm not responsible for Darius's problems. If he wants to fight half the pack, that's his business. The wind answered by rattling the shutters. Thanks for the support, she muttered. As if on cue, a sharp knock echoed at her door. Alina frowned, setting the jar aside. Visitors were rare unless someone needed medicine or advice on what not to eat in the forest. When she opened the door, Elder Ryland practically fell inside. Alina yelped, catching the old man before he hit the floor. His arm dangled awkwardly, a nasty gash stretching from his shoulder to his chest. Oh my, what happened to you? She gasped, dragging him toward the couch. Training accident, Ryland wheezed. Apparently, I'm not as quick as I used to be. Training accident? Alina narrowed her eyes, grabbing her medical kit. Did the accident happen to have giant teeth and an attitude problem? Ryland winced. Celine might have gotten a little enthusiastic. Alina pressed a damp cloth to the wound, ignoring Ryland's hiss of pain. I keep telling you to stay out of the training fields. You're not 20 anymore. He grunted. I'm not dead either. Yet, she muttered. As she stitched up the gash, Ryland watched her with sharp eyes, like he was reading her mind. You've been thinking about leaving, haven't you? Alina's hands froze for half a second before she continued sewing. What makes you say that? You're grinding herbs like they insulted your family, she sighed, tying off the final stitch. I just don't want to be around when the challenge starts. Ryland chuckled, then immediately regretted it, clutching his side. You think leaving will keep you safe? Yes, she said flatly. I prefer not to get trampled. His eyes softened, but his tone remained serious. Alina, the pack's going to need you, especially if Darius wins. Alina stood, packing away her supplies. If Darius wins, he won't need a healer. He'll need a cleanup crew. Maybe. But you're more important to this pack than you realize. She paused at the doorway, the weight of his words settling over her like a blanket she didn't ask for. Ryland shifted on the couch, his old bones creaking. You can leave if you want, but something tells me this fight is going to change things. For everyone. Alina wanted to argue. She wanted to point out that healers didn't belong in the middle of power struggles. But as she stared at the wounded elder on her couch, part of her knew she wasn't going anywhere because, deep down, no matter how much she hated it, she cared. And that was probably going to be her downfall. Chapter 5. Alina was starting to think the universe had it out for her. She wasn't positive, but when an elder wolf with suspicious claw marks crashed on your couch the same week the pack's scariest alpha-in-waiting was planning to fight anyone with a pulse, you had to wonder. Elder Ryland lay propped up on pillows, sipping herbal tea like he hadn't just bled all over her floor. His arm was bandaged, and his face looked slightly better, now that it wasn't ghostly pale. Alina sat across from him, arms crossed, waiting for him to explain why he'd actually shown up at her door half dead. So, she began, tapping her foot. Want to tell me what really happened out there? Because I don't buy the Celine got enthusiastic story. Rylan lowered his cup slowly, like he was about to drop some dramatic truth bomb. All right, but you're not going to like it. I don't like anything about this week, Rylan. Hit me with it. He sighed and leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I was ambushed. Alina's eyes narrowed. Ambushed? By who? Rylan scratched his beard, avoiding eye contact. Technically, by 3 whos. 3? Alina nearly choked. Who jumps an elder? What, were they hoping to win a discount dominance fight? Rylan chuckled, but it quickly turned into a wince. Apparently, they thought I was an easy target. She threw her hands in the air. Because you are. You're 70, Rylan. He waved her off, like age was a minor inconvenience. It's not the first time someone's tried to take me out before a challenge. Alina groaned, rubbing her temples. You can't keep wandering into danger. You're going to get yourself killed, and I do not have time to plan your funeral. Rylan sipped his tea thoughtfully. I'd like wildflowers at this ceremony. Not funny. They sat in silence for a moment before Alina asked a question gnawing at her brain. Was this about Darius? Rylan's eyes darkened. He set his cup down with a soft clink. It usually is. Alina sighed. Of course it was. Everything revolved around Darius these days. If he wasn't fighting someone, he was intimidating the villagers by standing ominously in corners. Rylan leaned back, watching her carefully. Listen, Alina. I know you like to stay out of these things. Correct. But you can't ignore what's happening forever. She arched a brow. I'm pretty sure I can. I'm very skilled at ignoring things. It's one of my core talents. Rylan smirked, but his expression softened into something more serious. I mean it. Wolves who sit on the sidelines during these fights, they end up paying the price. Sooner or later, someone knocks on their door. Alina opened her mouth to argue but stopped. Because the thing was, she knew he was right. She'd seen it happen before. Wolves who tried to stay neutral during power struggles were often seen as weak or easy to manipulate. If Darius won, maybe it wouldn't matter. But if he lost? Alina didn't want to think about what came next. Look, Rylan said, reading her hesitation. I'm not saying you need to pick a side. Just be careful. The pack's on edge, and when wolves feel threatened, they start lashing out. Alina ran a hand through her hair, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. I just want to be a healer, she muttered, staring at the jar of herbs on the table like it held all the answers. They don't care who wins or loses, I know. Rylan's voice was soft, but there was something else, something sad lingering beneath it. But sometimes, the fight finds you anyway. Alina swallowed hard. Great. More cryptic wisdom. Just what she needed. She forced a smile, trying to lighten the mood. Well, if anyone else tries to ambush you, maybe consider running next time, Rylan grinned. And deprive you of more patience? I wouldn't dream of it. Alina laughed, despite herself. But the unease didn't fade. As Rylan settled in to nap on her couch, she stood by the window, watching the moonlight stretch across the fields. 2 days until the challenge. She could almost hear the distant howls already, echoing through the night like a warning. Maybe she should have started researching that tropical beach life after all. Chapter 6. Alina was never going herb picking at night again. Ever. It had seemed like a great idea at the time. The moon was bright, the air was cool, and she was running low on wolfsbane, which, ironically, had nothing to do with actual wolves. She'd figured a quick trip to the woods would be peaceful. Relaxing, even. Instead, she found herself crouched behind a bush, gripping her satchel, like it could shield her from the absolute bloodbath happening 50 feet away. 2 wolves were fighting. And by fighting, she meant trying to turn each other into fur rugs. The clash of claws and snarls echoed through the clearing. One wolf, huge, dark-furred and looking way too comfortable in a fight, was definitely Darius. The other wolf was Marcus, the current alpha. Well, soon-to-be former alpha by the looks of things. Alina peeked out between the leaves. Darius fought like he wasn't even trying. Every time Marcus lunged, Darius dodged or countered with enough force to send the older wolf crashing into the dirt. "Jeez," she whispered. "Leave some ego intact at least." Marcus's growls were getting weaker, but he refused to stay down. He charged again, teeth bared. Darius stepped aside and slammed him into the ground with a casual swipe of his paw. Oof. The crowd of wolves watching barely made a sound. They knew how this would end. Alina did not sign up for this. She was a healer. She liked dealing with scratches and sniffles, not alpha battles. She was just here for some herbs, not live-action Game of Thrones. She shifted slightly, hoping to sneak away unnoticed. Snap! Her foot landed on a very unfortunate stick. Darius's ears twitched. His head snapped in her direction. "Oh no!" Alina flattened herself behind the bush, heart pounding. Maybe if she held perfectly still, he'd think it was a rabbit or a weirdly shaped rock. Seconds passed. A very tense, very awkward silence settled over the clearing. "Alina," Darius's voice rumbled. "I know you're there." Great. She considered making a run for it, but that felt like a surefire way to get labeled suspicious bushgirl for the rest of her life. Reluctantly, she stood up, brushing dirt from her knees and doing her best to look totally normal, like she wasn't just spying on a death match. "Oh, hi there," she said, waving awkwardly. "Didn't see you guys there, just, gathering some lavender. It helps with anxiety, and well, you know." Darius stared at her. So did everyone else. "Herbs," she added weakly, lifting her satchel. No one laughed. Marcus groaned on the ground. Darius didn't even glance at him. His eyes, sharp and golden, remained fixed on Alina, as if he was trying to figure out if she was brave, stupid, or a weird mix of both. "You shouldn't be here," he said, taking a slow step toward her. "Agreed," Alina chirped. "Total accident. I'll just be on my way." She turned, ready to bolt back to the safety of her cottage. But Darius's next words froze her mid-step. "Wait." She didn't love the sound of that. Darius looked around at the gathered wolves, then back at Alina. His expression was unreadable, but there was something almost amused in his eyes. "Since you've witnessed this," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire pack to hear, "I might as well make it official." Alina blinked. "Wait. What?" Darius crossed the clearing, stopping just a few feet away from her. He was ridiculously tall. Like, too tall. His presence alone felt like it could knock someone over. He met her gaze with the same calm intensity he always carried. "I claim Alina as my mate." "What?" Alina stared at him like he'd just declared she was the queen of Mars. Behind Darius, several wolves gasped. One dropped whatever they were holding. Marcus, still lying face down in the dirt, lifted his head just to squint in confusion. "I'm sorry, I think I misheard you," Alina said, laughing nervously. "Did you say mate?" Darius gave her a slow nod, like this was a perfectly normal, non-shocking announcement. "No, yeah, I heard you," she replied, frantically scanning the crowd for someone, anyone, to intervene. "I'm just wondering if maybe you hit your head during the fight, or maybe you're joking." He wasn't joking. "Why?" she hissed, lowering her voice. "Why would you say that? We don't even talk." "You're a healer," Darius said, as if that explained everything. "The pack needs strength. You'll be a good Luna." Alina pinched the bridge of her nose. This was too much. "I fix scratches, Darius. I'm not exactly alpha material." His gaze softened, just enough for her to catch a flicker of something else. Something that almost looked like trust. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. The pack murmured around them, clearly unsure how to process what they'd just witnessed. Meanwhile, Alina's brain was doing somersaults, trying to figure out how to politely decline a very public, very dangerous-looking alpha. Thanks, she said, forcing a grin. I'll let you know how I feel about that. Never. Darius smirked slightly. You'll come around. Oh, I doubt it. She turned on her heel, muttering to herself as she marched back toward the village. Behind her, Darius's gaze followed her all the way home. Chapter 7. Alina had a list of things she never wanted to do. 1. Get into a fist fight with Celine. 2. Accidentally start a fire. 3. Become Darius's mate. Unfortunately, life had just crossed one item off that list without asking her permission. It had been less than 24 hours since Darius's very public "I claim Alina as my mate" moment. Alina had spent most of that time pacing in her cottage, muttering things like, maybe he was joking, and, can I pretend that never happened? Spoiler, Darius was not joking, and pretending it didn't happen? Yeah, not an option. By morning, half the pack was camped outside her door, watching her house like she was some rare, endangered animal they didn't know how to handle. Some wolves whispered, others stared, and one pup tried to leave a dead squirrel as a gift. It was all very unsettling. Shoo! Alina called through the window. I'm not doing Luna things today. The wolves didn't leave. In fact, one of them sat down closer to the door. Great, she muttered. I have fans now. Her moment of peace was short-lived because seconds later someone knocked, no, pounded on her door. Alina. Darius's deep voice rumbled. She froze. Oh, no. Maybe if I stay completely still, he'll think I'm not home. I can hear you breathing, he added. That's unfortunate, she replied, reluctantly cracking open the door. Darius filled the doorway like a terrifying wall of muscle and fur. His sharp golden eyes practically screamed alpha. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside without an invitation. Come right in, I guess, she mumbled, closing the door behind him. Darius looked around her cozy, herb-filled cottage like he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong dimension. She doubted he spent much time in homes that smelled like chamomile tea and lavender. Look, Alina started, cutting straight to the point. About that whole claiming me as your mate thing, I think we should revisit that idea, and maybe... Not. Darius crossed his arms, staring at her like she'd just suggested the sky wasn't blue. It's already done. No, see, that's the thing. It shouldn't be done, because no one asked me if I wanted to be part of it. You were there, he replied, as if that counted as a signed contract. Alina threw her hands in the air. I was behind a bush. Darius's lips twitched. She swore he was trying not to smile. You witnessed the challenge, he said, calm as ever. By ancient law, I claimed you as Luna. Oh, ancient law, she scoffed. Why not? Love being dragged into lifelong commitments by rules written before indoor plumbing. Darius leaned against her table, completely unbothered. You'll get used to it. Alina narrowed her eyes. Or, I could leave. That finally wiped the smirk off his face. You won't get far, Darius said smoothly. The pack already considers you Luna. If you run, they'll follow. Alina paled. They'd chase me? He nodded once. Wolves are stubborn. Yeah, no kidding. Alina slumped into a chair, head in her hands. So what you're telling me is that I can't escape this? Darius shrugged. It's better to accept it. I don't intend to release you. Her head snapped up. Oh, so now I'm some kind of hostage girlfriend? That's charming. His gaze softened slightly. You're not a hostage, Alina. The pack needs strength. You have it, even if you don't see it yet. Yeah, well, strength wasn't on my shopping list, she grumbled. Darius straightened, his tone shifting into something more serious. Come to the den tonight. The council will meet you. Oh, good. she muttered. A meeting with wolves who probably want to kill me. Looking forward to that. Dare you, mean one, Alina said, and the way he said it, low and deadly, made her believe him. Still, the whole situation felt surreal. As Darius moved toward the door, he paused. Wear something. Respectful. Alina blinked. Respectful? You wore a shirt with rabbits on it to the last pack gathering. It's cute, she defended. Darius gave her a look that clearly said, Lunas don't wear rabbit pajamas to leadership meetings. He left without another word, disappearing into the forest like the mysterious, broody alpha he was. Alina sat in silence for a long moment. A meeting with the council? Tonight? She groaned and flopped back in her chair. Maybe if she just didn't show up, Darius would change his mind. Or maybe the pack would break down her door and drag her there. Either way, Alina was pretty sure she was stuck. Chapter 8. Alina needed backup. Specifically, the kind of backup that came with decades of wisdom, zero interest in pack politics, and a general dislike of unnecessary drama. So, naturally, she went to see Mira. Mira was the village's oldest healer, which meant she'd been around for way too long and knew everything about everyone. Her cottage smelled like herbs and mystery, and she had the unsettling ability to know what you were about to say before you even said it. Basically, Mira was terrifying in the way only sweet grandmothers could be. Alina knocked softly on the door, and it creaked open almost immediately. You're late, Mira called from inside. Alina blinked. I didn't know I was supposed to be here. You are now. Yeah. Mira was definitely psychic. Alina stepped inside, dodging low-hanging bundles of dried herbs and shelves packed with ancient books that looked like they could curse someone by accident. Mira sat by the fireplace, stirring a pot of something that smelled suspiciously like soup or potion. Maybe both. So, Mira said, without looking up, I hear you've been claimed by Darius. Alina groaned and flopped into a chair. Oh, not you too. I was hoping for 5 minutes of peace. Peace? Mira snorted. Not when Darius is involved. I didn't ask to be his Luna, Mira. I was just trying to collect herbs, and somehow that turned into accidental eternal commitment. Mira chuckled, ladling soup into a bowl and sliding it across the table to her. That's how it happens sometimes. 1 minute you're gathering flowers, the next you're tied to an alpha. Alina took a sip. It was delicious. Of course, Mira even made comforting soup better than her. I don't know what to do, Alina admitted. I can't just say no. Mira raised an eyebrow. You could. Sure. And then I'd wake up to the entire pack camping on my lawn again. Mira laughed softly. Yes, they are persistent. Alina set the bowl down and leaned closer, lowering her voice. Mira, why would Darius do this? I mean, I'm not exactly the Luna material type. I stay out of fights. I heal. I have no interest in, ruling things. Mira's eyes darkened slightly, her usual light demeanor shifting to something more serious. Darius isn't like the others, she said quietly. He sees things differently. His claim on you may not be just about dominance. Alina frowned. What does that mean? Mira tapped the side of her teacup thoughtfully. You know about the ancient bonds between alphas and their mates, don't you? Sure, Alina said, waving a hand. Mate bonds make wolves stronger, everyone knows that. Yes, but there's more to it than that, Mira replied. Some alphas seek mates not just for strength, but for balance. Darius, he carries darkness with him. You've seen it, haven't you? Alina thought back to the fight she'd witnessed. The cold, calculated way Darius had taken down Marcus without breaking a sweat. Yeah. She'd seen it. Mira leaned forward. He might believe that you are his balance. Alina nearly choked on her soup. Oh no. No. I'm not the balancing type. I'm more of the awkwardly stands on the sidelines type. Mira smiled knowingly. Sometimes, the most unlikely wolves are the ones who keep the dangerous ones grounded. That's poetic and all, but I really don't want to be the dangerous ones grounded. That's poetic and all, but I really don't want to be the dangerous ones grounded. That's poetic and all, but I really don't want to be the dangerous ones grounded. That's poetic and all. Mira stood, crossing the room to one of her many shelves. After rummaging for a moment, she returned with a small leather cord wrapped around a gleaming silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. She pressed it gently into Alina's hand. "This will help," Mira said. Alina stared at the pendant. "What is it?" "An enchanted talisman. It carries protective magic. Darius is powerful, but even the strongest wolves are vulnerable to old magic." Alina squinted at the necklace. "So, if he tries to turn into a scary, overprotective alpha, I just flash this at him like, ta-da, and he calms down?" Mira laughed. "Something like that. It should shield you from being overwhelmed by the bond." Alina slipped the pendant around her neck, feeling the cool weight of it against her skin. "Thanks," she said, half smiling. "At least now I have some magical bling to go with the impending doom." Mira placed a hand on her shoulder, her expression soft but serious. "Be careful, Alina. Darius may not mean you harm, but that doesn't mean he's not dangerous." Alina nodded, trying not to think too hard about what that meant. As she left Mira's cottage and stepped back into the night air, she toyed with the pendant around her neck. One thing was becoming clearer by the minute. She might not want to be involved in pack politics, but she didn't have a choice anymore. Chapter 9. Alina had a simple plan. Pretend none of this Luna business was happening, and hope Darius got distracted by something more interesting. So far, it was not working. For the past 2 days, she had gone about her usual healer duties, gathering herbs, fixing minor injuries, and avoiding eye contact with every single person in the village. It didn't help. The pack was acting weird. "Oh, Luna, let me carry that for you." A young warrior practically sprinted across the field to grab her satchel. Alina held on tightly. "I got it, thanks." "No, no," he insisted, tugging harder. "It's a bag of leaves, Corey. Calm down." Still, he wrestled it from her grip like it was pure gold. Then there was the market incident. "Luna, take as many apples as you like," the vendor gushed, shoving fruit at her like she was royalty. "I don't need. They're on the house." Alina now had enough apples to open her own stand. And the worst part? Celine. The pack's fiercest warrior, who already didn't like Alina, had taken glaring to professional levels. Celine's eyes followed her everywhere, and the expression said, "I can bench press you, and I just might." Awesome. But the real problem showed up that evening when Alina returned to her cozy little cottage, ready to relax with tea and pretend she wasn't technically Luna. And who was waiting on her porch? Darius. Because of course he was. He stood with his arms crossed, leaning casually against the doorframe, like he had all the time in the world, his golden eyes fixed on her the second she stepped into the clearing. Alina groaned internally. "You're in my spot," she said, walking up the path. Darius didn't move. "You haven't come to the den." "I know," she replied brightly, unlocking her door. Weird how that worked out. He stepped inside before she could close it. "Seriously?" she muttered. "Boundaries, Darius." He glanced around her small cottage like it was some kind of foreign environment. His large frame made the space feel ridiculously tiny. "This isn't the den," he said flatly. "Wow," Alina gasped sarcastically. "I hadn't noticed." Darius narrowed his eyes slightly. "You're supposed to live with me now." Alina crossed her arms, standing her ground. "Yeah, about that. I think I'll pass." The silence that followed was heavy. "You can't just pass on the bond," Darius said. his voice dropping into that alpha gravelly tone that probably intimidated everyone except her. "I'm pretty sure I just did. You're weakening it by staying here." Alina sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Darius, I don't want to be Luna. I'm not interested in den life, pack politics, or whatever it is alphas do all day. I heal people, that's it." For a long moment, Darius said nothing. His intense gaze stayed locked on her, and she could practically feel the weight of it pressing down. Finally, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I didn't claim you just for show, Alina. Whether you like it or not, the bond exists. Ignoring it puts us both at risk." She glanced up at him, trying to ignore how close he was standing. Darius had that brooding energy, the kind that made everything feel dramatic and life-altering even when it probably wasn't. "Okay, but what happens if I keep ignoring it?" she asked, arms still crossed. Darius arched a brow. "You'll get weaker. I'll get weaker." Her eyes widened. "Oh, fantastic. Mutual destruction. Love that for us." "It's not that simple. It feels that simple." Darius's expression softened, just a little, enough that she almost thought he might actually listen to her. "I'm not asking you to lead battles," he said. "I'm asking you to stand beside me. The pack needs strength from both of us. Even if you don't want the role, it's already yours." Alina hated that what he said kind of made sense. But that didn't mean she liked it. She sighed dramatically, sinking into the nearest chair like the weight of the world had personally chosen to sit on her shoulders. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll think about it." Darius tilted his head, clearly skeptical. "You'll think about it?" "Yes. That's as good as you're getting." He exhaled through his nose, probably deciding not to push the issue for now. "Don't wait too long," he warned, heading for the door. Before he left, he paused, glancing over his shoulder. "If you run, I will find you." Alina rolled her eyes. Yeah, big scary alpha tracking skills. I got it." But once he was gone, she sat in silence, fiddling with the pendant Mira had given her, because, despite all the sarcasm, one thing was becoming painfully clear. Running away wasn't going to solve this. Chapter 10. Alina's day had been going perfectly fine. She'd brewed some tea, restocked her healing herbs, and managed to avoid any and all conversations about pack politics. For a brief, blissful moment, she thought maybe, just maybe, Darius had forgotten about the whole "you're my mate" thing. Then she got tackled by a wolf. One second she was peacefully picking chamomile, the next she was flat on her back, staring at the sky while a snarling gray-furred werewolf hovered over her like she owed him money. Can I help you?" she wheezed, trying to squirm out from under him. The wolf growled, his teeth bared inches from her face. "Oh, cool," she thought. "I'm about to be someone's dinner." "Darius shouldn't have chosen you," the wolf snapped, his breath awful. "Weak mates mean weak alphas." Alina blinked. "Okay, rude." She twisted, grabbing for the satchel at her side, hoping she could throw a handful of herbs in his face, because honestly, what else did she have? Before she could unleash the power of mint leaves, a dark blur crashed into the gray wolf, knocking him clean off her. "Stay down," Darius's voice growled, low and lethal. Alina sat up, brushing dirt from her hair, just in time to see Darius pin the rival wolf to the ground like he was swatting a fly. His claws pressed against the wolf's throat, and the look in his eyes said, "I dare you to try something else." The rival squirmed, but wisely decided to keep still. "Attacking a Luna," Darius growled. "You must have a death wish." She's not even," the wolf stammered, but Darius's claws dug in just a little deeper. "I don't recall asking for your opinion," Darius said coolly. Alina, still sitting awkwardly in the grass, waved hesitantly. "I'm fine, by the way. Thanks for asking." Darius ignored her. Typical. A crowd had started to gather around the clearing, whispering in hushed tones. Alina could feel their eyes boring into her, half in curiosity, half in judgment. "Luna or not," one of the elders muttered. "If she's going to stay here, she needs to stand with them. Otherwise, this will keep happening." Another wolf nodded. "She's a target as long as she's out here alone." Alina's stomach dropped. Fantastic. First I get mauled, now I'm a walking bullseye. Darius finally released the rival wolf, letting him limp away with his tail between his legs. Without missing a beat, he turned toward Alina and offered his hand. She hesitated, staring at it like it might bite her. "Do I have to take it?" she asked. "You can sit in the dirt if you'd prefer," Darius replied, his face completely serious. Alina sighed and grabbed his hand. He pulled her to her feet like she weighed nothing. Before she could dust herself off, Darius raised his voice for the whole pack to hear. "She is your Luna," he declared, his golden eyes sweeping over the crowd. "Challenge her, and you challenge me." Alina froze, feeling every single eye shift to her. "Oh, great." The crowd murmured their approval, or at least, their acceptance. Alina, meanwhile, resisted the urge to crawl into a bush and stay there forever. She tugged on Darius's sleeve, lowering her voice. "Did you have to say that in front of everyone?" "Yes." "Cool. Love being the center of attention. Definitely didn't almost get eaten 5 minutes ago or anything." Darius's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "You'll get used to it." Alina let out a dramatic sigh. "I liked it better when people ignored me." The crowd slowly began to disperse, but not before several wolves gave her polite, and some not-so-polite, nods of respect. One pup even waved excitedly like she was some kind of celebrity. Alina waved back weakly. Once everyone was gone, she faced Darius, crossing her arms. "So, is this my life now? Constantly dodging assassination attempts between herb picking?" Darius shrugged. "Only for a while." "Oh, good. Can't wait." He smirked slightly. "You'll survive. You're tougher than you think." Alina pointed to the scratch on her arm. "Clearly." He stepped closer, his gaze meeting hers with that intense alpha-level seriousness again. "Stay at the den," he said, more softly this time. "I can't protect you if you keep hiding out here." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because the truth was, he wasn't wrong. Alina exhaled, glancing back at the village. As much as she hated the idea of being tied to all this alpha drama, she wasn't exactly thrilled about almost dying in the forest either. Maybe, just maybe, moving into the den wouldn't be the worst idea. Hastily brushing back my damp hair from my face, I huddled under the white soap. "I'll think about it," she mumbled. Darius arched a brow. "That's what you said last time." "Yes, but now I mean it slightly more." He gave a small nod, apparently accepting her half-commitment. "I'll hold you to it." As Darius turned to leave, Alina watched him go, feeling the weight of the pack's expectations settle over her like a heavy blanket. There really was no turning back now. Chapter 11. Alina had always imagined her first official ceremony would involve something fun, like a birthday, or maybe getting a really good haircut. Instead, she was about to be named Luna of the Blackridge Pack, because of a bush, a bad habit of herb gathering at night, and one slightly overprotective alpha. Honestly, her life decisions were starting to concern her. She stood at the edge of the pack's ceremonial clearing, fiddling nervously with the edge of her dress. Mira had practically shoved her to it, claiming she couldn't show up to her own Luna ceremony wearing pants with questionable tea stains. "Relax," Mira whispered beside her, patting her arm. "You look the part." Alina glanced down at herself. The long, flowing blue dress was nice enough, but it didn't exactly scream werewolf queen. She felt more like a kid wearing her mom's clothes. "I feel ridiculous," she muttered. "You'll be fine. Just don't trip over the logs during the ritual." "Excellent advice, Mira." I feel super reassured. The gathered wolves fell silent as Darius stepped into the clearing. He was in his usual, "I'm intimidating and I know it" mode. Black shirt, tall boots, and that unreadable expression that made him look one wrong stare away from growling at someone. Alina half expected him to flash a charming smile and say something reassuring, like, "You've got this." Instead, he just nodded at her and said, "Try not to pass out." "Ah, perfect, thanks, Darius." The elders began the ritual, lighting small fires around the clearing. A low hum filled the air as the wolves formed a circle, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Alina shifted uncomfortably. "This feels like a cult meeting." One of the elders stepped forward, holding a bowl of herbs and moon water. He dipped his fingers in and started to speak in old pack tongue, which sounded a lot like someone gargling marbles. Alina tried to follow along, but the only part she caught was the phrase, "strength of the Luna." Yeah, that part felt important. After a few more incomprehensible lines, the elder gestured for her to step forward. This was it. Her brain screamed, "Run, leave, fake your death and start over somewhere new." But her feet ignored that instinct and moved forward anyway. Alina stood in front of Darius, who towered over her like a statue, his golden eyes fixed on hers, intense but calm. "Ready?" he asked quietly, so no one else could hear. "Not even a little." Darius smirked. "Good." As the elder pressed a cold mark of moonwater onto her forehead, Alina felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. The firelight flickered, and the air seemed to hum louder. Then, it hit her. A sudden rush of energy coursed through her veins, hot and electric, like she'd just touched something she shouldn't have. Her knees wobbled, and for a split second, she thought she might actually fall over in front of everyone. Darius grabbed her arm, steadying her. "Breathe." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one currently vibrating with mystical wolf magic. "What was that?" she whispered, trying to shake off the feeling. "Your bond with the pack," Darius replied calmly, though his grip on her arm tightened slightly. "It's normal." Normal? She was 99% sure this wasn't normal. The elder lifted his hands, signaling the end of the ritual. The pack howled in unison, their voices rising toward the full moon. Alina felt her wolf stir in response, something she hadn't felt this strongly before. The bond between her and Darius seemed to pull tighter, like an invisible thread connecting them. When the howling faded, Darius leaned in, his voice low against her ear. "You felt it, didn't you?" Alina swallowed, not trusting her voice. She gave a small nod. "It'll get stronger," he added, stepping back to address the pack. "Stronger?" "No thanks," she could barely handle this much. As the wolves approached to offer their congratulations, Alina plastered on a polite smile, accepting awkward nods and handshakes. Most of them seemed friendly enough, but others, not so much. Celine gave her a look that screamed, "I'm watching you." The woman turned briefly and left the class, and Alina stared back like, "Cool, please don't punch me." By the time the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, and Alina immediately sought Mira. "Okay," she hissed under her breath. "What was that weird surge of power, and why didn't you warn me about it?" Mira smiled knowingly, her eyes twinkling with something suspiciously like amusement. "It's part of the bond, dear. You're Luna now. The pack's magic will flow through you, whether you like it or not." "Not," Alina replied instantly. Mira chuckled. "He'll adjust. Eventually." As Alina glanced over her shoulder, Darius caught her eye from across the clearing. His gaze lingered, and for a brief moment she felt that same strange pull deep in her chest. Oh, yeah. She was in for it now. Chapter 12. Alina had faced many challenges in her life. Stubborn pups, dramatic warriors with paper-cut-level injuries, and once, a wolf who insisted his headache meant he was dying. But nothing, absolutely nothing prepared her for pack politics. She had barely survived the Luna ceremony, and now she was being paraded through Darius's den like the newest exhibit at a werewolf museum. "Smile more," Mira whispered beside her. "I am smiling," Alina hissed back, trying not to grit her teeth. "You look constipated." "Thank you for that incredibly helpful feedback." Darius led the way, calm as ever, while Alina followed alongside Mira, trying not to trip over the hem of her dress. The den wasn't just one big cave. It was more like an underground village with tunnels and stone chambers, and about 20 wolves staring at her like she was a surprised guest at a family reunion no one invited her to. Darius finally stopped in the main chamber, where a long wooden table sat surrounded by several wolves who all looked like they could bench press Alina and the table. "Alina," Darius said, motioning to the group, "these are my advisors." Advisors was clearly code for wolves who might secretly want to eat me. Alina gave a polite little wave. "Hi, don't mind me, just your friendly neighborhood healer." The oldest of the group, an elder named Garrick, raised an eyebrow. "Friendly neighborhood healers don't usually end up as Luna." Alina smiled tightly. "Yeah, funny how that worked out." Another wolf leaned back in his chair, smirking, and yet, here she stands. Darius moves fast. Mira nudged her gently. "That's Marcus. He talks a lot, but bites less." Marcus grinned. "I heard that." But not everyone seemed as amused. Across the table, Celine sat with her arms crossed, watching Alina like she was a fly that had landed on her lunch. Celine was tall, broad-shouldered, and oozed warrior energy. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight braid, and there was a faint scar along her jaw that screamed, "I fight things for fun." "She's not fit to lead," Celine said bluntly, not bothering to lower her voice. "Well, okay then." Alina blinked, glancing at Darius, half expecting him to shut Celine down. Instead, he said absolutely nothing. "Cool. Love that for her." "I'm not leading anything," Alina replied, forcing a laugh. "I just heal people and occasionally avoid getting mauled. No need for alarm." Celine's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to avoid anything now, Luna." The way she said Luna made it sound like an insult. Alina opened her mouth to respond, but Mira cut in smoothly. "Celine's protective of the pack, Alina. Don't take it personally." Celine snorted. "I'm protective of Darius." "Ah!" There it was. Alina wasn't blind. She'd seen the way Celine watched Darius like she was 2 seconds away from writing his name in her diary with hearts around it. "Good," Alina replied, meeting Celine's stare. "He could use the backup. He's always running around brooding dramatically." Marcus choked on his drink. Garrick outright laughed. "Darius? He didn't even blink." Celine's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, Alina wondered if she was about to get tackled again, in front of everyone this time. But instead of attacking, Celine leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "You think this is funny?" she asked coldly. "The pack doesn't need someone to joke their way through leadership. Strength is what keeps us alive." Alina's smile faded slightly. "I'm not trying to lead anything, Celine," she replied evenly. "I know what I am. I'm a healer. I didn't ask for this Luna role, but here we are." Celine's eyes darkened. "And that's exactly why you shouldn't have it." The room fell silent. "Oh good, a full-on challenge, perfect." Before Alina could find a clever way to escape, Celine stood and crossed the room, stopping just a few feet from her. "I'll make this simple," Celine said quietly. "Compassion doesn't protect the pack. warriors do. Alina met her gaze, refusing to look away even though her inner wolf was screaming, "Run." This woman could kill you with her pinky finger. "I understand that," Alina replied, voice calm. "But someone's got to be around to fix you all when you break something." A low murmur ran through the chamber, and Marcus snorted into his cup. Darius finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Celine," he said firmly, "enough." Celine didn't move. She held Alina's gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment before stepping back with a slight smirk. "Let's hope you survive long enough to do that," she said. And with that, Celine walked out, leaving Alina standing in the middle of the chamber, heart pounding like she'd just finished a marathon. Mira clapped a hand on her shoulder. "Well, that went better than expected." Alina stared at her. "I think she just threatened me." "Probably." "Cool. Love that." Darius approached, his expression unreadable. "Don't take Selena's words to heart," he said quietly. "She respects strength." Alina crossed her arms. "Great. Do I punch her or something?" Darius smirked. "It's an option." Alina let out a long sigh. This was going to be a long Luna career. Chapter 13. Alina wasn't sure why she agreed to a midnight run with Darius. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that every time she tried to sleep, she swore she could hear Darius's voice in her head, saying things like, "You can't ignore the bond forever." Or maybe she just needed a break from the passive-aggressive death glares Celine had been throwing at her all day. Luckily, her daughter promised to go to sleep with her and spend the night with her. "Willoos!" Maybe either way, there she was, standing under the full moon, arms crossed, staring at Darius like he'd asked her to participate in some weird pack exercise. "Let me get this straight," she said. "We're just running?" Darius nodded, already shifting into his wolf form. His sleek black fur shimmered under the moonlight, and those sharp golden eyes locked onto hers, like he was waiting for her to follow. Alina squinted at him. "This isn't one of those alpha dominance tests, is it? Because if I trip and fall, I fully expect you to pretend you didn't see it." Darius snorted in his wolf form, which was both impressive and slightly insulting. With a sigh, Alina took a few steps back, letting the shift take over. Her bones stretched and rearranged until she dropped down onto all fours, her silver-gray fur blending into the shadows. Darius gave her a once-over before taking off through the forest. "All right, then. Guess we're doing this." Alina ran after him, feeling the cool wind rush past her. She'd forgotten how freeing it felt to let her wolf take control, how easy it was to leave behind the awkward conversations, pack politics, and constant reminders that she was supposed to be Luna now. For a while, they just ran. No talking, no glares. Just the rustle of leaves and the sound of paws hitting the earth. Eventually Darius slowed, leading them to a small clearing on a hill that overlooked the village below. Alina padded up beside him, shifting back into human form and brushing her hair out of her face. "Not bad," she admitted. "I didn't trip once." Darius shifted too, stretching his arms as he sat down on a nearby rock. "I noticed." Alina sat next to him, pulling her knees to her chest. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the village lights flicker in the distance. "You do this often?" she asked. "Sometimes," Darius replied, his voice quieter than usual. "It helps." She glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Helps with what? Your brooding aesthetic?" He smirked. "With control." Alina blinked, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "Control?" Darius's gaze drifted to the moon, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. "When I was younger, shifting wasn't easy for me," he admitted. "I'd lose control. The wolf took over more often than I wanted." Alina tilted her head. What changed? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he plucked a small stone from the ground, rolling it between his fingers. "My father trained me until I learned to suppress it," but the more I suppressed, the more it fought back. Alina frowned. Suppressing part of yourself doesn't sound healthy. It wasn't. She glanced at him, suddenly aware that there was a lot more to Darius than the brooding, scary alpha image he projected. "So, what happened?" she asked softly. His golden eyes flicked toward her, unreadable as always. "I lost my family. After that, the beast stayed quiet. For a while." Alina's heart sank. "Darius, I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." His voice was calm, but she could hear the weight behind his words. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his carefully constructed armor, the parts of him he didn't show the rest of the pack. "You don't have to carry everything alone, you know," she said, nudging him lightly with her elbow. Darius arched a brow. "Says the one pretending she isn't Luna." Alina groaned, leaning back against the rock. "I'm not pretending. I'm just actively ignoring it." He chuckled softly. "You can't ignore it forever." "That's what everyone keeps saying. Because it's true." Alina chewed her bottom lip, glancing at the silver pendant Mira had given her. She could feel the bond between her and Darius humming quietly beneath the surface, stronger now after the Luna ceremony. It scared her. She wasn't ready to let the bond take over, to surrender to it completely. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "The whole fated mate thing, it feels heavy." Darius leaned closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "It is, but resisting it only makes it harder." Alina shifted, uncomfortably. "So, what? I'm just supposed to let the bond take over my life?" "No," he said quietly. "But the more you fight it, the weaker we both become." She looked away, focusing on the distant lights of the village below. She wanted to trust him. Really, she did. But trust wasn't something that came easily to her. Darius seemed to sense her hesitation. He didn't push, didn't demand answers. He just sat there beside her, his presence steady and unshakable. "Take your time," he said finally. "But know this. Whether you accept the bond or not, I won't let anything happen to you." Alina glanced at him, feeling her heart skip just a little. "Wow," she said, forcing a grin. "That's dangerously close to being sweet. You feeling okay?" He smirked, shaking his head. "Don't get used to it." Alina laughed, and for the first time in a long while, the weight on her chest felt just a little lighter. But as she sat there beside Darius, watching the moon rise higher in the sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that sooner or later, she'd have to stop running from the bond and face it head-on. Chapter 14. Alina's peaceful afternoon of making tea and not thinking about the whole Luna thing was rudely interrupted by a very large, very unconscious werewolf crashing through her door. "Alina!" Marcus, Darius's second-in-command, barged in behind the injured wolf like this was a casual house call. "Need you to fix this." Alina blinked at the scene. A bloodied warrior lay sprawled across her floor, groaning faintly. Her teapot, tragically, was now upside down, leaking tea onto her rug. "Okay, first of all," Alina said, grabbing towels. "I just cleaned this place," Marcus grunted. "I'll buy you a new rug." "You said that last time." "Yeah, but I mean it this time." Alina knelt beside the injured wolf, pressing her hand against his chest to check the damage. His breathing was shallow, and his fur was matted with blood. "What happened?" she asked, already pulling herbs from her satchel. "Order skirmish. Fenris's wolves crossed into our territory again." Marcus crossed his arms, frowning. Bastards got a little too bold." "Clearly," Alina sighed. "Why does everything around here involve claws and teeth? Can't we just, I don't know, talk it out?" Marcus snorted. "Yeah. Wolves aren't big on tea parties, Luna." She scowled. "You don't have to call me that." "Sure, but I'm gonna." Alina ignored him, focusing on the injured wolf. His pulse fluttered under her touch, But something strange happened the longer her hands lingered. A faint glow radiated from her fingertips, soft and silvery, like moonlight. Marcus took a step back. Is that supposed to happen? Alina blinked. Nope, not even a little. The glow grew stronger as she concentrated. The wolf's breathing steadied, and the deep claw marks across his chest began to close, way faster than they should have. By the time Alina pulled her hands away, the wolf stirred, his eyes fluttering open. What happened? He croaked, looking around in confusion. You almost died in my living room, Alina replied. You're welcome, by the way. Marcus stared at her like she'd just performed actual magic. That's not normal, he said slowly. Tell me about it, Alina muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. I usually just slap on some bandages and hope for the best. By the time Marcus dragged the healed warrior out the door, half the village had heard the story. And because werewolves loved gossip almost as much as they loved dramatic dominance battles, the rumors spread faster than wildfire. By sunset, the entire pack was whispering about Alina's moon goddess powers. Did you hear? She healed Garrett with her bare hands. I heard she's blessed by the moon goddess herself. She glowed, I swear it. One wolf even claimed she had levitated, which was both ridiculous and wildly inaccurate. Alina slumped into her chair, pressing her face against the table. I healed one person, and now everyone thinks I'm running some kind of magical wolf hospital. Mira, who had been listening to the gossip outside, cackled from the kitchen. Well, you can't blame them. Not every healer accidentally glows on the job. Alina groaned. Great, this is just what I needed, more attention. As if on cue, Marcus appeared in the doorway again, looking far too amused. You ready for more attention? He asked casually. Nope. Well, too bad. She peeked at him through her fingers. What now? Marcus smirked. Darius just called a council meeting. He's naming you as the lead negotiator for the next border talk. Alina bolted upright. What? You heard me. Is he out of his mind? I'm not a negotiator. I barely convinced Celine not to throw me off a cliff last week. Marcus shrugged. Apparently Darius thinks you're the best choice. Did Darius say that? Not in so many words, Marcus admitted, scratching his beard. It was more like, Alina will handle it, and anyone who disagrees can deal with me. Alina slumped back in her chair. I don't know whether to be flattered or terrified. Marcus grinned. Both is a solid option. As the council meeting loomed closer, Alina realized two things. One, Darius clearly thought she could handle more responsibility than she wanted. Two, the pack was starting to believe in her, even if she didn't believe in herself yet. And that? That was a problem. Chapter 15. Alina didn't know what was worse. Leading pack negotiations, or realizing she had to do it. Without snacks. You're serious about this? She asked Darius as they approached the meeting point near the border. I can't negotiate when I'm hungry. What if I accidentally agree to hand over the village because I'm thinking about bread? Darius glanced at her, clearly unimpressed. You'll survive without bread. Debatable. Marcus snickered from behind them. Maybe bring snacks next time, Luna. Thank you, Marcus. Alina threw her arms up. See, he gets it. Darius ignored them both. Typical. As they approached the clearing, a small group of wolves from Fenris's pack were already waiting, watching with the kind of expressions that said, We don't trust you, but we'll pretend to listen. Alina straightened her back, silently hoping she didn't look as nervous as she felt. One of the wolves stepped forward, a tall man with gray streaks in his hair and an air of smug confidence that immediately made her want to roll her eyes. Darius didn't show, the man said, looking her over like she wasn't worth his time. And he sent his healer to speak for him? Alina smiled sweetly. No, I sent myself. Darius is just here to make sure I don't accidentally fight someone. Darius raised an eyebrow at her, clearly questioning that statement. The man, who Alina decided to mentally name Smugface, crossed his arms. "This is a waste of time. You're not fit to speak for the Blackridge Pack." "Ah, there it is." Alina had been waiting for someone to undermine her. Right on cue. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "unless you'd rather negotiate with Darius directly." Smugface opened his mouth, but Alina held up a hand, cutting him off. "Because if that's the case," she added, flashing a sweet smile, "I'm sure Darius would love to handle this his way, with claws and blood." Darius stepped closer, looming just enough to add to the effect. Smugface hesitated. His pack shifted nervously behind him. "That's what I thought," Alina said, folding her hands neatly in front of her. Behind her, Marcus choked down a laugh. "Negotiation? Nailed it!" For the next half hour, Alina did her best to keep the conversation calm and civil, which was hard because Smugface kept glaring at her like she'd insulted his mother. They discussed border patrols, territory lines, and something about hunting rights that she barely paid attention to. Everything seemed to be going fine, until one of Fenris's wolves, a tall, hooded figure who hadn't spoken until now, stepped forward. "You should be careful, Luna," the man said quietly. His voice was smooth, but something about it made Alina's wolf tense. "Not all your wolves are loyal." The clearing went dead silent. Alina blinked. "Excuse me?" "Not everyone on your council agrees with Darius's decisions," the man continued. His eyes glowed faintly beneath his hood. "Some of them might prefer other leadership." Her heart skipped. Darius stiffened at her side, and the temperature around him seemed to drop by several degrees. "Are you suggesting someone from Blackridge is feeding you information?" Darius's voice was low, dangerous. The hooded man smiled faintly. "I'm not suggesting anything." Alina forced herself to stay calm, but her mind was racing. Was he bluffing? Or was there actually a traitor in their pack? "Thank you for your input," Alina said coolly, pretending not to care. "But I don't take advice from strangers who don't introduce themselves." The man chuckled but said nothing else. When the meeting finally wrapped up and Fenris's wolves disappeared into the woods, Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Well," she muttered, "that wasn't alarming at all." Marcus walked ahead to give them space, but Darius lingered beside her as they made their way back to the village. "You did well," Darius said after a moment. Alina looked at him suspiciously. Was that a compliment? He smirked faintly. "Don't let it go to your head." They walked in silence for a while, but Alina could feel the weight of what the hooded man had said hanging over them. Finally, Darius broke the quiet. "I need you to be careful," he said, his voice lower than usual. Alina glanced at him. "You think he was telling the truth, don't you?" Darius's jaw tightened. "I do, and if there's someone in my council leaking information, I won't let it go unanswered." Alina shivered. Darius wasn't one to make empty threats. "Any idea who it could be?" she asked carefully. His golden eyes narrowed. "I have a few suspects." She didn't like the sound of that. "Look," she said, trying to keep the mood light. "If I get stabbed in the back by some traitorous wolf, I expect at least one dramatic revenge scene." Darius's smirk returned, but his eyes stayed serious. "If anyone touches you, I'll handle it." Alina rolled her eyes, pretending her heart didn't just flutter a little. "So overprotective. I can take care of myself, you know." "I know," Darius replied. "But you don't have to." And for once, Alina didn't argue. Chapter 16. Alina had exactly 2 plans for the day. 1. Drink tea. 2. Avoid Selene. Sadly, neither happened. "Get up," Selene barked, standing over her with crossed arms and an expression that clearly said, "I'm going to make you regret your life choices." Alina squinted up from her spot on the training field. "I am up. Technically." Selene nudged her boot against Alina's ribs. "Lying on the ground doesn't count?" I'm resting. It's part of the process. It's been 10 minutes. Alina groaned, peeling herself off the dirt. This is excessive, even for you. Celine smirked. I thought Lunas were supposed to be tougher. Lunas also drink tea and read books, Alina shot back, wiping her hands on her pants. So maybe we could train in a library next time. Marcus chuckled from the sidelines, clearly enjoying himself way too much. She's got a point, Celine. Celine narrowed her eyes. You want to spar next, Marcus? He immediately straightened. Nope. You're doing great, Luna. Keep it up. Howard. Alina turned back to Celine, brushing hair from her face. All right, what now? More sparring? Or can I bribe you to let me quit early? Celine grinned, and for the first time, Alina swore she saw a flicker of respect behind the usual cold glare. Try to hit me, Celine said, slipping into a fighting stance. Alina frowned. I feel like this is a trap. It is. Perfect. Still, Alina did as she was told, lunging forward to throw a punch. Celine dodged easily, twisting her arm to pin Alina's wrist behind her back. You hesitate too much, Celine growled. Stop thinking like a healer. Force of habit, Alina grunted, trying to squirm out of her hold. Celine released her, stepping back. Do it again. For the next hour, Celine proceeded to knock Alina down, repeatedly. But here was the thing. Alina got back up, every time. By the end of it, Alina was covered in sweat and dirt, but she hadn't given up. Marcus whistled from the side. I've seen worse. Wow! Thanks, Marcus, Alina huffed, hands on her knees. Really boosting my confidence. Celine eyed her, arms crossed. She's not terrible, Alina straightened. Wait, was that a compliment? Celine grunted. Don't get used to it. Progress. As the younger pack members filtered into the training grounds, Alina stayed to watch. She noticed a few of them sneaking glances her way, whispering behind their hands. One pup, no older than 10, jogged up to her with wide eyes. Luna, can you show me that thing you did earlier? Alina blinked. You mean the part where I face-planted into the dirt? The pup giggled. No, when you dodged Celine's kick. It was cool. Celine muttered. Barely dodged. Alina smiled down at the pup. Sure, kid. But if you fall, I'm not responsible for bruises. The pup cheered, calling his friends over, and before Alina knew it, she was surrounded by a bunch of eager young wolves. They wanted tips, advice, and even healing tricks. Alina might not have been the fiercest warrior, but apparently that didn't matter to them. Marcus watched the interaction from a distance, nodding in approval. You're good with them, he said quietly as he walked by. They trust you. Alina shrugged. Kids are easier to deal with than brooding alphas and scary warriors. He grinned. Give it time. They'll grow up and start brooding too. As the sun dipped below the trees, the training ended. Most of the pack headed home, leaving Alina wiping sweat from her forehead and wondering if her body would ever forgive her for the workout. That's when Darius showed up. She spotted him leaning against the entrance to the training field, arms crossed, watching her with the same unreadable expression he always had. Here to mock me for losing to Celine? She asked, approaching him. No, he said, holding something out to her. Here to give you this. Alina blinked, glancing down at the item in his hand, a silver blade with an intricate wolf design etched into the hilt. What's this for? She asked, carefully taking it. You're Luna now, Darius said simply. You'll need it. Alina turned the blade over in her hands, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't flashy, but it was sharp and perfectly balanced. You sure this isn't some elaborate way of telling me I'm terrible at fighting? She teased. Darius smirked. It's a reminder. You're stronger than you think. Alina looked up at him, and for once, she didn't have a sarcastic comeback. Thank you, she said softly, tucking the blade into her belt. Darius gave her a small nod, and for a moment, the usual tension between them felt lighter. As they walked back toward the village, Alina felt the eyes of the pack on her, not with doubt or suspicion, but with growing respect. And for the first time, she thought, maybe being Luna wouldn't be so bad after all. Chapter 17. Alina was having a pretty good day, right up until the part where someone tried to murder the entire pack. She'd just finished organizing her herbs, in alphabetical order because she was that bored, when Marcus barged into her cottage like his hair was on fire. "Alina, get your stuff, we've got a situation." She stared at him, mid-tea sip. "Border attack. Wolves are down. Darius needs you now." Alina set her tea down with a sigh. "I was really hoping situation meant something like, puppies got stuck in a bush." Marcus gave her a deadpan look. "No puppies, just blood." "Cool. Love that." By the time they reached the border, the place looked like it had hosted the world's worst family reunion. Wolves lay scattered across the field, some groaning, others unconscious. Darius was already in full alpha mode, barking orders and looking extremely terrifying. "Who did this?" Alina asked, kneeling beside a wounded pack member. "Fenris's wolves," Marcus growled, "or at least, that's the guess. No one saw them coming." Alina pressed her hands to the injured wolf's side, and like before, that strange, moonlight glow seeped from her fingers. The gashes slowly closed, leaving behind faint scars. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Still freaky, but I'm not complaining." "I'll take freaky over dead any day," Alina muttered. More wolves were brought to her and she worked faster than she ever thought possible. The moon overhead felt like it was supercharging her, and she wasn't sure if she liked it or if she should be concerned. After healing the fifth warrior, Alina wiped her hands on her pants and looked up at Darius. "How many more?" Darius didn't answer. He was busy glaring at something far across the field. Following his gaze, Alina spotted a group of wolves standing just outside the border. One stepped forward, a tall, broad-shouldered man with wild hair and an unsettling smirk. "Oh great," Marcus muttered. "That's Fenris's second-in-command. His name's Calder." Calder raised a hand in a fake friendly wave. "Darius, you're looking well. I see your Luna's been busy." Alina frowned. "Is he complimenting me?" "Doubt it," Marcus grunted. "Watch your back." Darius took a few steps toward the border but didn't cross it. "You're trespassing," he growled. "Leave. Now." Calder's smirk widened. "I'll pass. My alpha has a message for you." Darius's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Speak carefully." Calder's gaze flicked to Alina, lingering just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Fenris says this can all stop. No more bloodshed, no more fighting." Alina raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's nice. We love peace around here." Calder's smirk didn't budge. "There's just one condition." Darius's posture tensed. "Which is?" Calder grinned. "Send Alina to Fenris. In exchange, he'll leave your pack alone." The entire field went dead silent. Alina blinked, pointing at herself. "Wait, me? What would Fenris even want with me?" Marcus frowned. "He probably heard the rumors about your healing." "Fantastic. Love being popular," Alina muttered. Darius's eyes flashed gold, and his wolf energy rolled off him in waves. "If Fenris thinks I'd hand over my mate, he's more delusional than I thought." Calder chuckled. "You can't blame him for trying. She's impressive." Darius stepped forward, and for a moment, Alina swore Calder flinched. "This conversation is over," Darius growled, his voice dark and dangerous. "Tell Fenris that if he touches my mate, I'll tear him apart." Calder shrugged. "Suit yourself, but Fenris doesn't let things go. You can't protect her forever." With that, Calder signaled to his wolves and disappeared into the forest, leaving behind nothing but tension and the faint smell of arrogance. Marcus let out a long breath. Well, that wasn't stressful at all. Alina crossed her arms, glaring at Darius. So, care to explain why I'm suddenly tradable merchandise? Darius's jaw clenched, but his eyes softened slightly when they met hers. Fenris is testing us. He thinks you're our weak spot. Alina scoffed. Me? Please, I'm practically unkillable at this point. Marcus chuckled. I mean, she did heal, like, half the pack in an hour. Darius didn't look amused. It's not just your healing, Alina. It's the bond. Fenris knows how important you are to me. Alina's heart did that weird fluttery thing she hated. Okay, well, next time he sends his goons, tell him I'm out of stock. Marcus snorted. Darius, on the other hand, looked deadly serious. We'll be ready, he said quietly. But stay close, Alina. I won't let him take you. Alina sighed dramatically. Great. Guess I'll start carrying around that fancy silver knife you gave me. Darius smirked. Good. You might need it. As they walked back to the village, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from over. Chapter 18. Alina knew something was off the second Fenris himself strolled into Blackridge territory like he was here for tea and biscuits. The pack gathered in the village square, watching the rogue alpha with the kind of energy that screamed, I'm trying to act cool, but I might bolt at any second. Fenris stood tall, his wild hair falling past his shoulders and his dark eyes gleaming like he enjoyed making people uncomfortable for fun. His smirk practically oozed, I eat puppies for breakfast. Alina leaned toward Marcus, whispering, Are we sure he's not a villain from a werewolf soap opera? Marcus snorted. Wouldn't surprise me. Darius stepped forward, his usual calm mask slipping into something colder. You're not welcome here, Fenris. Oh, come on, Fenris said, spreading his arms dramatically. I just wanted to catch up. It's been too long since I was last thrown out of this charming little village. Alina squinted. Wait, thrown out? Fenris turned his gaze to her, and Alina instantly regretted asking. You didn't know? Fenris grinned like this was his favorite topic. I used to stand right where Darius is standing now. Could have been Alpha. Should have been. Yeah, Darius growled. And then you tried to overthrow the pack and nearly started a war. Fenris shrugged. Minor detail. Alina glanced between the two alphas, waving her hand. Okay, hang on. Someone needs to give me the full tea. Marcus, ever the helpful gossip, leaned closer. Fenris challenged for leadership a few years back. He wanted to combine packs and create one giant territory. Darius wasn't a fan. Darius shot Marcus a glare that said, Shut up before I throw you into the forest. Fenris chuckled. Darius and I used to be allies, brothers in arms, you could say. Until he decided I was too ambitious. More like unhinged, Darius replied flatly. Semantics, Fenris said with a grin. Alina frowned. So you've been holding a grudge all this time. Fenris's eyes gleamed as he stepped closer, just to the edge of what the pack would tolerate. It's not just a grudge, Luna. Your mate's bond with you changes things. It makes him stronger. It tips the scales. Alina shifted uncomfortably. Oh, right. Blame the healer, classic. Fenris smirked. Don't flatter yourself. It's not just you. It's what you represent. She crossed her arms. And what's that? Power, unity, balance, Fenris said, his tone dropping to something darker. If Darius keeps growing stronger, the other packs will fall in line behind him. And that? That ruins all the fun for me, Marcus muttered. He's just mad he's not in charge. Darius ignored them both. His golden eyes locked on Fenris, voice hard as stone. You think trying to destabilize the pack will change anything. It already is, Fenris said casually, glancing around at the gathered wolves. Alina followed his gaze, and that's when she saw it. Wolves, whispering nervously to each other. Some shifting their weight like they weren't sure where to stand. Cracks. little fractures in the pack's unity, spreading slowly, like Fenris had planted seeds of doubt and was just waiting for them to bloom. I've heard the rumors, Fenris continued, circling the edge of the crowd. Some of your wolves aren't happy with how things are being run. They think Darius has gone soft. Darius's fists tightened, but he stayed silent. Alina, on the other hand, raised her hand like she was in school. Quick question. If Darius is soft, what does that make you? The unhinged wilderness guy. Fenris actually laughed. You're entertaining. I can see why he likes you. Gee, thanks. Alina deadpanned. Fenris stopped circling, his gaze flicking back to Darius. This isn't over. Sooner or later, your pack will have to choose follow you blindly, or follow someone who isn't afraid to lead by force. Darius stepped forward, and for a second the tension could have shattered glass. They'll follow me, Darius said coldly. Because I don't lead through fear. Fenris gave a slow, lazy smile. We'll see. With that, he disappeared into the trees, leaving behind a crowd of uneasy wolves and one very irritated alpha. Later that night, Alina found Darius at the edge of the village, staring at the horizon like it had personally offended him. She sidled up next to him, nudging his arm. You good? You've been brooding for like 2 hours straight. Darius didn't look at her. Fenris was right about one thing. Wow. That's not a sentence I thought I'd hear. Darius finally glanced at her, his expression softening just slightly. There are wolves in this pack who might not stand with me if Fenris pushes harder. Alina crossed her arms, leaning against him lightly. So, what's the plan? Fight him? Outbrood him? He smirked faintly. Maybe both. There was a long pause before Darius added, Fenris didn't just want leadership. He wanted to claim the pack through force. When he failed, I exiled him. Alina's brows shot up. Wait. Exiled. Like, kicked him out of the wolf club. More like dragged him across the border and told him he'd lose his head if he came back. Wow, she muttered, very subtle. Darius's golden eyes darkened. He hasn't forgotten. And now he's testing the pack. Testing me. And you. Alina sighed, brushing her hair back. Fantastic. Another psycho-alpha who wants me for some weird power reason. I feel so special. Darius stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers with that intense, I'll destroy anyone who touches you energy. I won't let him take you, he said quietly. Alina felt her heart flip, which she really needed to talk to it about later. I know, she replied softly, but even as she stood next to Darius, watching the stars scatter across the night sky, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that Fenris's threat wasn't just words. It was a warning.
Chapter 19. Alina sat at the council table, staring at Darius like he'd just suggested they solve the Fenris problem with interpretive dance. Let me get this straight, she said slowly, tapping her fingers against the wood. Your plan is to attack Fenris's pack before he attacks us? Darius nodded, arms crossed, his golden eyes practically daring someone to disagree. It's the safest option. Marcus leaned back in his chair, casually munching on an apple. By safest, I assume you mean for us, not for the dozens of wolves we'll be mauling. Exactly, Darius replied without hesitation. Alina threw up her hands. Oh, great. I love the solve problems with more problems approach. Classic. Darius's gaze flicked to her, but she wasn't about to let him intimidate her into silence. Look, she continued. Fenris may be crazy, but launching an attack just makes us look like the bad guys. Plus, I don't know if you've noticed, but he likes fighting. We'd be playing right into his hands. Garrick, the oldest council member, grunted in agreement. Alina's got a point. A war means casualties on both sides. We can't risk it. Celine, sitting across from Alina, scowled. Or we could just take him out and stop pretending he'll play nice. He's not exactly the let's talk about our feelings type. Neither are you, Celine, Marcus quipped. Celine shot him a glare that could melt steel. Darius remained silent, but the tension around him was obvious. He hated this. All of it. Alina sighed, leaning forward. I get it. Fenris is dangerous. But if we keep running headfirst into every fight, we're just going to lose more wolves. There's another way, Darius arched an eyebrow. And what's that? The words were out before she could stop them. I'll negotiate with him. The entire room froze. Marcus choked on his apple. Garrick blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. Even Celine paused mid-glare. Darius? Yeah, he looked like she'd just suggested kissing Fenris on the mouth. No, Darius said flatly, crossing his arms tighter. Alina lifted a hand. Hear me out. No. Darius. Still no, Alina groaned, rubbing her temples. Look, if I go, Fenris won't pull anything stupid. He wants me for some weird bond reason. I can use that to our advantage. Marcus squinted at her. I don't know if, hey, the rogue alpha thinks I'm shiny counts as a negotiation tactic. It's better than starting a war, Alina shot back. Darius's golden eyes burned into her. It's not happening. She met his glare head on, even though her inner wolf was screaming, What are you doing? Why not? She challenged. You trust me, don't you? The room went dead silent again. Even Celine stopped glaring long enough to look intrigued. Darius's jaw tightened. This isn't about trust. Isn't it? Alina countered. I can do this, Darius. You just have to let me. For the first time since the meeting started, Darius looked genuinely conflicted. His usual stone-faced demeanor cracked, and something softer flickered behind his eyes. He didn't like the idea, that much was obvious. But he also knew she wasn't going to back down. Marcus leaned over to Garrick, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear. Is it bad that I kind of want to see how this plays out? Garrick snorted. A little. Darius shot them both a look before turning back to Alina. You're really willing to risk this? He asked quietly. She nodded, trying to ignore the fact that her palms were sweating. Yes, if there's a chance to stop this without anyone dying, I have to try. Darius exhaled slowly, like he was mentally counting to 10. Finally, he spoke. If anything happens to you, he said in a dangerously low voice, Fenris won't live to regret it. Alina grinned. Oh, believe me, if things go south, I'll handle it long before you get there. Celine smirked slightly. At least she's got confidence. Marcus shook his head, clearly entertained. This is either going to end really well or really, really badly. Most of my ideas do, Alina replied cheerfully. As the meeting ended, Darius lingered behind, pulling Alina aside before she could escape. I still don't like this, he muttered. I figured. Darius's gaze softened just enough to make her heart skip. You don't have to prove anything, Alina. She smiled, bumping his shoulder lightly. I know. But I'm not just doing this for the pack, I'm doing it for you too. Darius didn't respond right away. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than usual. Be careful. Alina smirked. I'm always careful. Darius raised an eyebrow. You tripped over a log this morning. Okay, I'm occasionally careful. Despite everything, Darius let out the smallest laugh, and for just a second, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. Chapter 20. Alina wasn't sure what the protocol was for meeting with a rogue alpha who wanted to steal you, but she assumed showing up with snacks and good vibes wouldn't cut it. So instead, she brought a dagger, some nerve, and absolutely no backup. Brilliant decision-making, really. Fenris was already waiting when she arrived at the clearing, leaning casually against a tree like he wasn't the most wanted wolf in Blackridge history. His signature smug grin stretched across his face the moment he spotted her. Look at that, Fenris drawled, pushing off the tree. Darius actually let you come alone? I thought for sure he'd chain you to his den. Alina crossed her arms. Oh, he tried. I'm sneakier than I look. Fenris chuckled. I like you already. Let's not make this weird. Fenris strolled closer, circling her like a wolf, deciding whether to eat or play with his food. You're brave to meet me like this. Brave or stupid, she replied. Haven't figured it out yet. His grin widened. Maybe both. Alina rolled her eyes. Look, can we skip the part where you try to intimidate me and get to the talking part? I'm on a tight schedule. Darius is expecting me to return before sundown, and I don't feel like explaining why I'm late to literally anyone. Fenris's smile thinned at the mention of Darius. Ah, yes, the ever-watchful mate. He really doesn't like sharing, does he? Can you blame him? Alina replied with a smirk. I'm a delight. Fenris let out a low laugh, but there was something colder behind his eyes now. I can see why he's so protective. Alina's shoulders stiffened. Let's keep this professional. Why did you call for me? Fenris's gaze sharpened, and the playful act dropped like a stone. I'm giving you a choice, Alina. Darius may be strong, but his way of ruling is limiting. Oh, here we go, Alina muttered, the join the dark side speech. Fenris's eyes gleamed. You joke, but you don't understand the full picture. Darius's obsession with control will break him, and when it does, he'll take you down with him. Alina's smirk faded. You don't know him as well as you think you do. Fenris stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know him better than you ever will. I've seen the side of him he hides from the pack, maybe even from you. Alina clenched her fists, resisting the urge to stab him, just to make him stop talking. What exactly are you offering? Fenris leaned in, just enough to make her skin crawl. Join me. Rule by my side. You and I could lead something far greater than this little pack. You wouldn't have to stand in Darius's shadow. Alina pulled back, glaring up at him. Not interested. You're sure? Fenris said, voice soft but deadly. I've felt your power, Alina. You're not just a healer. There's something else, something even Darius can't tame. For a brief second, her heart skipped. She hated how much his words nagged at her. Nice try, she said, forcing herself to stay calm. But I'm loyal to Darius. You're wasting your breath. Fenris's smirk returned, but there was a flicker of disappointment behind it. Loyalty is a fragile thing. Let's see how long it lasts. Alina turned to leave, done with whatever mind games he thought he was playing. But as she stepped away, Fenris called after her. This won't be the last time we speak, he said. Sooner or later, you'll see things my way. And when that happens, I'll be waiting. Alina paused, not bothering to turn around. You'll be waiting a long time, Fenris. She left him standing there, feeling his eyes on her back long after she disappeared into the trees. By the time Alina returned to the village, the weight of Fenris's words hung over her like a storm cloud that refused to leave. She found Darius waiting by the gate, arms crossed and radiating disapproval. You're late, he said, his voice calm but edged with irritation. Alina offered a breezy smile. What can I say? Fenris is a talker. Darius's eyes narrowed. Did he threaten you? Nope, she replied, but he did offer me a job. Darius blinked. What? Alina shrugged. Apparently, I'm eligible to be Rogue Alpha Queen now. Who knew? Darius's expression darkened. And I said no, obviously. Darius let out a breath, tension still thick around him. Good. But Fenris won't stop there. Alina sighed, brushing hair from her face. Yeah, he made that super clear. Something about fate and not being able to protect me forever. Standard villain monologue stuff. Darius stepped closer, his gaze searching hers. And what do you think? Alina hesitated. She wanted to laugh it off, to make some snarky comment about how Fenris was just bitter and dramatic. But the truth? Fenris's words had planted something small but stubborn in the back of her mind. I think, Alina finally said, meeting Darius's eyes, we're going to have to be careful. Your pack trusts you, but Fenris knows how to find the cracks. Darius's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. Alina tilted her head. You don't have to handle everything alone, you know. His gaze softened, but just barely. I know. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Darius stepped back, nodding toward the village. Come on, let's get inside before Marcus starts spreading rumors that you ran off with Fenris. Alina grinned. Marcus would absolutely do that. As they walked together, Alina couldn't help but glance back toward the forest where the rogue Alpha had stood. She might have rejected Fenris, but she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot.